My name's Kendra Houseman from Out the Shadows, and I'll talk about county lines. Where do I start? Okay, so there's a few things that really get on my nerves about county lines, and it's the fact that it's become a bit of a buzzword. There's lots of people that talk about county lines as if they know what it is, but do people really know what it entails and what it looks like? So the thing I find most frustrating is people think it's quite a new thing. County lines is not a new thing. Like, absolutely no way is it a new thing. As long as there's been mobile phones, there's been county lines. And I think that it's been only been recorded, so it's only been recorded professionally from about 2015. Okay, so Dr. Simon Harding, he says that it's been recorded professionally since 2015 by the police. The word county lines come into play. But then you can go back as far as 2010, and there's like hints to it. There's people, professionals, talking about something like county lines, which is interesting to know the fact that when I was a kid, going country, which is what we call it, professionals, we call it county lines. Trust me, this, no young person that you ever work with is going to talk about county lines. That's our word. That's a professional's word. It's not a kid's word. Kids will talk about going country, going long. So when I was a kid, we often had what we would call countrymen. These were older boys that absolutely do what is classed as county lines. Okay, so I was born in 1980. So I'm going to say I've become aware of county lines from about 91, 92. I knew that people went country, and that's what county lines was. They went country. So when people talk about it, you know, like this new buzzword, it's a new thing, it's not laughable because it's not funny, but in my head, I'm just like, really? Really? The impact of county lines. Okay. So county lines has progressed so fast, but there was a time when you literally were sent with drugs or a phone or whatever on a line, on a train line to go somewhere. And I don't know how much people know about county lines, but I just want to make it very real how it is for some young people. So a lot of young people that know about county lines know about debt bondage. They will just know about it from their friends talking, okay? And most people know, young people know, that if you go and do a county lines run, there is a possibility you can get robbed on the way. And so what most young people know is this, is that sometimes a young person will have whatever they have, they will go on the way to their trip, and on the way, they will get robbed for everything. And then they will have to come back to the older. Well, I suppose they could run away, but they're going to come back to the older, and they're gonna beg for forgiveness. And the older will usually give them a lifeline and say, you've just got to work for a year to pay off the debt. But what really happens is that the older would have sent their own people to rob that child on the train. So now the older has got all their drugs or their money back, and they've got a free worker, and the child will never work off that debt. They will never, ever, ever work off that debt. So if you're hearing this, you're like, whoa, the kids already know about that. They know about debt bondage. So most kids will say that they don't want to do county lines or go country because they know about that. But if they don't get robbed on the way, county lines is one of the most profitable jobs within gang culture. And if you talk about social fields and how people gain social capital, social fields is a really good way, county lines is a really good way to increase your social capital. If you explain it like, if you sell drugs in the local neighborhood and you get 5 points, just imagine it like that, you get 5 points if you sell drugs on the corner. If you go and do county lines, you get 200 points. If you're like a 14-year-old kid, what are you going to do? And then the profit, the money generated from county lines is big. So in terms of social field, social capital, income and stuff like that, county lines doesn't look like a bad deal, not really, as long as you don't get robbed. However, what a lot of young people and professionals don't talk about is the sexual assault that takes place in a lot of county lines. So there's something called plug-in, where young people or vulnerable adults will have to hide drugs vaginally or anally. Sometimes they will do that themselves, and sometimes the gang members will do it for them. And then when they get to where they're going, sometimes they remove that themselves, and sometimes it's been removed for them. And I've gone into great big conversations with professionals that when we're looking at what has happened to a child, I say to them, you've got to include sexual abuse in that. That's a form of sexual abuse. And you see, I've seen some practitioners like, Where's the sexual abuse? I'm like, they've just been penetrated and had drugs inserted. So boys more so, they don't talk about that. They don't talk about the plugging at all. And that causes problems because there's anal tear. There's a whole lot of things that is a problem with that. But people don't want to talk about that. When people want to talk about county lines, they want to make it, we're talking about the travelling. No, let's talk about the nitty gritty. The nitty gritty of being taken to a trap house and having to stay there for so many days while the drugs are sorted out. County lines, there's a never-ending supply of workforce because all you need for county lines is vulnerable people to take advantage of, and there's plenty out there. So county lines never runs out of anything. So 2 weeks ago, Kent Police made an announcement on the radio. I was eating my cornflakes. I was just casually eating my cornflakes. I wasn't bothering no one. Had the radio on, and the policeman comes on. He says, "We've got no gangs in Kent, and we've got rid of we've got 2 areas that have got no county lines." I choked on my cornflakes, and I said, "Put me on the radio, like put me on." And I went on there, and I basically said a few things. One, you're lying. You're lying. Gangs are entrenched. There's no area without gangs. Like, it's just complete rubbish. You've got 2 areas without county lines. What, did you go around and tick people's names off? Are you involved in county lines? You don't know that. You can't say that. But by making that statement, by them making that statement, they just put a lot of children in a lot of danger, because they're basically saying, so any parents sitting at home that morning knowing that their child's been exploited, they know that, yeah? And the police just go, there's no gangs. They just put all them children in danger if anyone had listened to the police, because the police are making out that we haven't got that kind of exploitation going on in certain areas. Absolutely ridiculous. They brought the police on a couple of days later, and the police said that we concede. I think that means lying. They didn't want to say that, but they concede that they didn't have no gangs. But if I hadn't challenged it, if I hadn't said anything, then people would be walking around Kent thinking that we didn't have no gangs in the area. It's so, so dangerous. But county lines, it's not new by any means. It's very, very dangerous. But for the young person, it seems like a not too bad of a deal because they get a lot of street capital quickly and a lot of profit quickly. Yes, of course, there's a whole downside to that. They're not going to look at that. Also, you've got to look at something. Sometimes young people get involved in these kind of crimes because they are the sole breadwinner in a house. I know you might listen to that and think, they're kids. There was a point in my life between the ages of 12 and 15 that there were times when I was the breadwinner of my house, that my mum wasn't able, through mental health, to bring any income into that house at all. So I'd go and make money. I'm not the only child that was left in that position. So you need to understand is so many young people involved in county lines, they are the breadwinner for their house. So it seems like a lot of things bother me about county lines, but the criminalisation of children, punishing children for their own exploitation, is something that is never going to sit okay with me. So if you found a 14-year-old child, the police found them, a 14-year-old child with £5,000 worth of drugs on them, they will have to remove them drugs, and they will then arrest that child. And that child will be criminalised. There's no way around that. There is an opportunity, I guess, if the child wants to come forward and say they're being exploited, there is a chance something could change, but they would have to name the people that are exploiting them. Now, in most areas, there's no get out. So if you step forward and say you're involved in a gang exploitation, you won't be moved out of the area. It doesn't work like that. So let's say their 14-year-old child has been arrested, they've got the drugs have now been taken, so they're endangering their community. The police are criminalising them. They give them the opportunity to say, do you want to speak out about your exploitation if you've been exploited? The child knows they can't say nothing because they will then further get themselves in danger within the local community. Please remember, we're talking about children. These aren't adults, these are children. If you look at the case of Jaden Moody, okay, arrest of arrest, like, please go and read his case study, go and read his serious case review. It will shock you to the core. You'll read his serious case review and you'll see how much failings this child went through. But he gets arrested to do drugs, and he asks the police if he can ring the Samaritans. He's 14 years of age and he knows that something bad's going to happen, or he ends up being killed. And he asks the police if he can ring the Samaritans. Can you imagine? where you've got to be at when you're a 14-year-old child, and that's your option. I don't know if they let him ring Samaritans. It's not in the paperwork. I don't believe they did. And even if he had of, what would he have said? Because he's going to be criminalised. And so if we went to the prisons now, like, let's just end it here. If we went to the prisons now and we looked at the population of prisons and we counted up numbers, I'm sure there's actual figures that keep changing daily, and we then took out and released every single prisoner that was in prison due to their own exploitation, we probably halve prisons. Prisoners would be halved. In the how can we as humans think that's okay? That there's people they're in prison serving a sentence for their own exploitation. Nah, no.